troops on the ground into Israel. And Chuck Schumer, in an interview with Aaron Burnett earlier, also said that the Israelis have not asked for troops on the ground. What they want right now is support in the forms of things like of munitions, ammunition, and also just the support of having those terror strike groups off the coast to try and deter any other actors from getting involved. But even if a hostage rescue operation is attempted, it will be incredibly complex, it will be very, very difficult, and the Israelis will likely be seeking at least some sort of support from the Americans in terms of logistics and intelligence. Hadass Gold, CNN, Washington.
Still to come, could a trip to Israel be on the horizon for the US president? More on the invitation extended by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu next.
I was stuck. Unresolved depression symptoms were in my way. I needed more from my antidepressant. Vraylar helped give it a lift.
Adding Vraylar to an antidepressant is clinically proven to help relieve overall depression symptoms better than an antidepressant alone. And in Vraylar clinical studies, most saw no substantial impact on weight. Elderly dementia patients have increased risk of death or stroke, report unusual changes in behavior or suicidal thoughts. Antidepressants can increase these in children and young adults, report fever, stiff muscles, or confusion, as these may be life-threatening, or uncontrolled muscle movements, which may be permanent. High blood sugar, which can lead to coma or death, weight gain, and high cholesterol may occur. Movement dysfunction and restlessness are common side effects. Stomach and sleep issues, dizziness, increased appetite, and fatigue are also common. Side effects may not appear for several weeks.
I didn't have to change my treatment. I just gave it a lift.
Ask about Vraylar and learn how AbbVie can help you save.
The White House said that there are no new travel plans to announce. Now, the two leaders did talk over the weekend to talk about ongoing military support by the U.S. and the conflict at large. And if this visit were to happen by President Biden, it would come on the heels of high-stakes diplomacy by Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who has been meeting with regional partners and his counterparts in diplomacy to avoid this conflict from spreading or widening any further. And in an interview with 60 Minutes, President Biden said that while Israel needs to respond, it would be, quote, a big mistake for there to be an occupation of Gaza. Take a listen.
What happened in Gaza, in my view, is Hamas and the extreme elements of Hamas don't represent all the Palestinian people. And I think that it would be a mistake for Israel to occupy Gaza again. But to going in and taking out the extremists, the Hezbollah is up north, but Hamas down south is a necessary requirement.
Now, all of this is top of mind as the White House goes into the week. On Sunday, President Biden was briefed regularly by his senior officials about the ongoing situation in Israel and Gaza. Priscilla Alvarez, CNN, the White House.
Join us now, CNN's Scott McLean. You try to make sense of the military movements within Gaza. It's so difficult to figure out, isn't it? But there have been attacks below the line at which the Israelis were evacuating people.
Yeah, so it might be helpful just to take a quick look at the map. So basically, Israel has said that basically the top third of the Gaza Strip should be evacuated. It's about 1.1 million people they've told to move south. And the difficulty, though, is that the airstrikes that we saw over the weekend, the IDF says that there were 250 of them yesterday alone on military targets, they say. They say that most of them were in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, but some of them were also south. So remember, these are places that people have evacuated to. And we've got video in from a place called Deir al-Bala, again, sort of in the central part of Gaza, where there were at least 2 airstrikes over the weekend, and there was horrifying video of the aftermath of people sort of scrambling around, wondering what to do. Obviously, people looking through the rubble. And also children showing up at hospitals as well. And then even just this morning, we don't have video from this, but there was another airstrike in Han Yunis, which is even farther south, where the local hospital, a doctor at the local hospital says that 10 people were killed, 23 people injured. So again, nowhere it seems is really safe in Gaza. Obviously safer in the south, but still far from a place that you'd want to be.
And in terms of, this preparation for getting humanitarian aid in. Once they're in, I mean, this is the challenge that the Egyptians are facing, isn't it? They're concerned that once those trucks and those convoys go in there, they've got to make their way through without being hit as well.
And I was listening intently to the question that you asked the IDF spokesperson about, can you give some assurances that these trucks won't be targeted? And he said, look, we're going to leave the diplomacy to the diplomats, and that, if we're told to cease fire, then we can cease fire. But obviously there's still a lot of danger there. There's obviously pockmarked roads making it difficult for things to get around, and the UN, other aid groups have been basically shouting as loud as they can to whoever will listen just about how dire the situation is. And basically it's life or death. You had the World Food Program saying that if they cannot help people and they are running out of food, that people will die. You have the UN saying that you're looking at potentially thousands of people dying as a result of the situation. MSF, Doctors Without Borders, they have been perhaps the starkest of all of them about the situation. They've called the Israeli strikes indiscriminate. They say that hospitals, ambulances have also been caught in the crossfire. And they say that, look, they are struggling to find water. Food obviously is in short supply. And the director in France said this, quote, "Hospitals are overwhelmed. There are no more painkillers now. Our staff tells us about the wounded screaming in pain, the injured, the sick who cannot get to the hospital." And also keep in mind as well that, look, this evacuation order coming from Israel also impacts about 22 healthcare facilities north of the line. But one of those hospitals, at least one of those hospitals, put out a video yesterday trying to explain why this wasn't possible. And in that video, you see, newborn babies in incubators. You see children on ventilators, and obviously they can't go anywhere because where on earth would they go? And the other difficulty that the MSFs or that aid organizations say that they're running into in some cases is people turning up to the hospital not necessarily because they're hurt or need medical attention, but because they need shelter. And they figure that in all of the chaos happening in Gaza, that hospitals are still probably one of the safest bets.
Actually, over the weekend as well, just to add to what Scott's saying, the WHO said that evacuation orders by Israel to hospitals in northern Gaza are a death sentence for the sick and the injured.
Exactly.
It's just the idea that they'd even have an ambulance to take them.
What do you mean?
To evacuate a lot of the pictures you were just showing there.
Right.
They need ambulances to evacuate.
Precisely. And you need roads to be able to get around. And we've already seen, some of the evacuation routes getting hit by bombs. Israel denies that it was their strikes. That's a different story. But the bottom line is it is simply not safe. And if you're a child on a ventilator, if you're a newborn baby or a parent of a newborn baby, the last thing you want to do is try to attempt to take your child somewhere south, knowing just how overwhelmed the hospitals are right now in the southern part of Gaza.
Okay, Scott, thank you.
The UN says a rocket hit its peacekeeping headquarters in Lebanon during an intense exchange of fire between Israel and Hezbollah on Sunday. An increase in cross-border attacks is raising fears that the conflict could be spreading. CNN's Ben Wiedemann has more now from southern Lebanon.
It was another day of cross-border strike and counter-strike between Hezbollah and Israel, with the violence edging beyond isolated incidents and starting to veer toward the scenario so many here fear. Another full-on war between Hezbollah and Israel, one worse perhaps than the more than month-long battle they fought in 2006. Throughout the day, Hezbollah fighters targeted Israeli military positions on the border, firing guided missiles at communications, observation, and surveillance equipment, and also hitting some Israeli towns, killing one Israeli civilian and wounding several others. Israel fired artillery and launched airstrikes on what it called Hezbollah military infrastructure. As a result of the fighting, Israel declared a 4-kilometer deep closed military zone along the border to keep civilians away. In the afternoon, a volley of rockets was fired into Israel, most intercepted by the Iron Dome. But it wasn't Hezbollah, but rather the military wing of Hamas that claimed responsibility. At roughly the same time, a rocket hit the headquarters of the UN peacekeeping force just north of the border, slamming into the helipad there. No one was injured. The UN is trying to determine where the rocket was fired from. All of this doesn't amount to war yet, but it's getting dangerously close. That would have been CNN, Southern Lebanon.
China takes on the crisis in the Middle East with top diplomats delivering some increasingly strong words for Israel. After the break, we'll take you to Beijing for the latest.
Plus, US House Republicans return to Capitol Hill today. First on the agenda, choosing their next speaker. Whether lawmakers can agree on a new leader remains to be seen. Details on that coming up.
Sustainably caught salmon in every bite. Jinx's real dog food made by real dog people.
I've been waiting for somebody just like you. Hoping, praying, run away to something new. My mistakes brought me to this place. I had to fall to get to you.
Find your someone at EliteSingles.com today.
Hi, I'm Sharon, and I lost 52 pounds on Golo. On other diets, I could barely lose 10 to 15 pounds. Thanks to Golo, I've lost 27% of my body weight, and it was easy.
Good morning with Gocalax.
Good morning. Yeah.
Try Gocalax Chewy Fruit Bites for fast and gentle constipation relief in as little as 30 minutes. Making your good morning even better with Gocalax.
Which hotel?
Somebody say which hotel? I'm great at this. Dance your fears in the spa-like bathroom. Or enjoy local craft beers with breathtaking views of the Cambria. Book direct at choicehotels.com.
It's Empire Today's half price sale. Half price on carpet, hardwood, vinyl, and laminate. Plus half price on quality professional installation. Schedule now.
800-588-2300 Empire.
Today, The Whole Story with Anderson Cooper is appointment viewing on Sunday nights. One whole story, one whole hour. The world's best journalists dig deeper into the stories they can't ignore. The Whole Story with Anderson Cooper, Sunday at 8 on CNN.
That's $78.29.
I've only got $50. Take out the cheese puffs and the broccoli. I mean, who likes broccoli?
Head out. Only $22.87 to go.
It would be faster with the Empower app. Empower Cash Advance gives you up to $250 instantly. No late fees, interest, or credit checks.
I've got money. Keep the cheese puffs, but leave out the broccoli.
Get Empower Cash Advance up to $250 instantly. Download the Empower app today.
Guys, how frustrating is it to find a great pair of jeans? Too tight here, too loose there, too long there? Standard jeans use just 2 measurements, and Tailor Custom Jeans use 7 different measurements to give you the perfect fit. Your phone can measure you right now. Download the M-Tailor app on iOS or Android. Choose from hundreds of styles. M-Tailor measures you digitally and is 20% more accurate than a professional tailor. With free shipping and a money-back guarantee, get your new favorite pair of jeans today. M-Tailor, available on the Apple App Store or Android.
Right, China weighing in on the war between Israel and Hamas. The country's top diplomat says Israel now has gone beyond self-defense with its actions since the Hamas attack.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi says that the right to self-defense should line up with international humanitarian law. He also told Iran's foreign minister in a phone call that statehood for the Palestinian people has long been put on hold.
Sina's Beijing Bureau Chief Xin Jiang joins us now from the Chinese capital. We are seeing this narrative emerge, aren't we? A similar sort of language to what we heard from the Egyptians, in fact.
Yeah, Max, you know, what Wang Yi said about Israel that you just mentioned has gotten quite a bit of attention because some view it as a more hardened stance from Beijing towards Israel as the humanitarian crisis in Gaza worsens. But, you know, in these statements, what's not being said sometimes is equally important as what's being said, or if not more so. One thing that's been missing in all of China's official pronouncements is the word Hamas. They have not named Hamas in any of their condemnations, and that is something also reflected in their state media coverage on the story, very much focused on the Palestinians suffering after the Israeli counterattacks while barely mentioning Israeli casualties after that initial heinous attacks launched by Hamas on October 7th. Now, that, of course, has not gone unnoticed by Israel and its allies, including the United States. But of course, Beijing claims it's very much impartial and it has no self-interest in this conflict other than being on the side of peace and justice. But you know, in all of that, in all of their readouts, as you mentioned, after Wang Yi held all these calls with his counterparts in the region, they've very much emphasized on the Palestinian cause. Of course, this is not something new in terms of the two-state solution. They're not the only ones saying it, but their messaging now, both domestically and internationally, have really made some elements to say the Chinese have made the conclusion that scoring points with the wider Arab world on this issue serves their overall interests better on the international stage, despite their close economic ties with Israel. That's still a country they view with suspicion, and state media here often portraying as a puppet state of the U.S., which may also be the reason why there's not much sympathy and support for Israel on their tightly controlled social media, even after an Israeli diplomat was brutally stabbed here on the streets of Beijing last Friday. But some experts also say this may be a reflection of China's lack of expertise and experience on this issue in this region, despite some recent inroads. So at the end of the day, they just tend to fall back to their default positions without offering much concrete solutions, at least in the short term. Max?
Okay, Stephen Jiang in Beijing, thank you.
The US Senate is going to receive a classified briefing on Israel and Gaza on Wednesday afternoon. That is according to a Senate source. A bipartisan Senate delegation is already in Israel. The group is led by New York Senator and Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. They met Sunday with Israeli President Isaac Herzog and other officials. Wednesday's Senate briefing will include the US Secretary of State, the Director of National Intelligence, the Defense Secretary, and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
When House Republicans gather behind closed doors in Washington this evening, they'll be in their 13th day of operating without a leader. Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan expected to force a floor vote on Tuesday as he tries to become the next Speaker of the House.
Jordan was nominated to replace Kevin McCarthy, who became the first Speaker in US history to be ousted by his own party. During Friday's nomination vote, Jordan seemed well short of the support that he will need to win that Speaker's gavel, but he appeared optimistic.
I think we'll get 217 votes.
But you will only keep running if you get 217 votes?
Watch yourself. I think we'll get 217 votes.
One senior House member who opposes a Jordan speakership tells CNN he thinks there are roughly 40 votes against him, and at least 20 members who are willing to go to the floor on Tuesday to block Jordan's path if he tries to compel a roll call vote.
So it seems unlikely that Jim Jordan will be able to get through and be elected Speaker, and where things might go from there is really anyone's guess. But many political observers agree that it doesn't look good for House Republicans moving forward. Law Professor Jessica Levinson spoke with CNN earlier on.
It looks like they are in chaos. It looks like they cannot pick a leader. It looks like they have ground our legislative agenda, meaning the country's ability to legislate, to a halt. And it looks like we are going to be facing another big budgetary crisis in just a few weeks. As we know, we kept the government open for 42 days. The clock is ticking, and Republicans are going to need to coalesce behind somebody and ensure that our government remains open, which is a public good for all of us. So it looks like there is a deep rift in the party, and it looks like this might be something that Democrats can really campaign on going into the 2024 election.
Now, still ahead, people across the world are showing their support for the civilian victims of conflict between Israel and Hamas. We'll show you some of the rallies worldwide.
He was only 47. Aneurysm. Did he have life insurance? Do you? No. You gotta get on it. Check out SelectQuote. Trust me, the peace of mind, it's worth it.
Come on down. Life insurance is too important to put off another day. That's why SelectQuote makes getting coverage you need easy, for less than $1 a day. Now get up to a $2 million policy with no medical exam and same-day coverage.
Visit SelectQuote.com. We shop you save.
This guy again. Pops!
Hey, son, you got a little something on your face.
Needed a quick shave.
Quick shave? Respect the process.
It ain't my dad's razor, Dad. It's from Gillette Labs.
Gillette Labs?
Gillette's ultimate shaving experience. This green bar releases trapped hairs from my face.
Game changer.
While the Flex, this contours to it.
Looking smooth.
Feeling even smoother.
How about hooking me up with some Gillette Labs?
Check your text.
You're the best.
Nah, you're the best.
The best a man can get keeps getting better.
The next generation of shaving is Gillette Labs.
Sustainably caught Atlantic salmon, immunity-boosting superfoods, and powerful probiotics in every bite. Jinx is real dog food made by real dog people.
When migraine strikes, you're faced with a choice. Ride it out with the trade-offs of treating, or push through the pain and symptoms. With Ubrelvy, there's another option. One dose works fast to eliminate migraine pain. Treat it anytime, anywhere, without worrying where you are or if it's too late.
Do not take with strong CYP3A4 inhibitors. Allergic reactions to Ubrelvy can happen. Most common side effects were nausea and sleepiness.
Migraine pain relief starts with you. Ask about Ubrelvy. Learn how AbbVie could help you save.
If you lived or worked at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina for at least 30 days from August 1953 through December 1987 and have been diagnosed with cancer, neurobehavioral effects, fertility issues, or more, you may qualify for financial compensation. A new law passed by Congress now allows veterans and survivors to seek damages for harm from exposure to contaminated water at Camp Lejeune. Call Saddle Rock Legal Group to discuss your case now.
Call 1-800-814-9977.
Can we get real clear about life with psoriasis?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Is your treatment leaving you with uncontrolled symptoms? Like the cover-it-ups and brush-it-offs?
Enough with good enough.
Don't stay hiding or hurting. When your lotions and creams don't do enough to help treat the inflammation beneath the skin causing plaques and pain, it's time to get real about psoriasis so your dermatologist can help you get clear. Make the appointment and ask about Real Clear Skin.
You should Angie that.
Angie what?
Angie that. It means connecting with skilled professionals to get all your home projects done well, so you can focus on the important stuff. It means seeing millions of ratings and reviews, so you can feel confident. It means comparing quotes or booking at an upfront price, so you can choose the best price for you. Because we want everyone to get the most out of their homes. Get started today at Angie.com.
Closed captioning brought to you by InventHelp. Call 1-800-710-0020.
Do you have an invention idea but don't know what to do next? Call InventHelp today. They can help you get started with your idea.
Call now. 800-710-0020.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has just landed in Tel Aviv.
Yeah, he's set to meet with Israeli leaders in the hours ahead. He says the US is actively working to ensure humanitarian assistance can get into Gaza. More than 270 Americans who had been stranded in Israel after the deadly Hamas attacks arrived in Florida on Sunday night. They landed in Tampa on a flight chartered by a non-profit group and Florida Governor and US Republican presidential candidate Ron DeSantis.
DeSantis was there late Sunday to greet the returning Americans on the tarmac. He said there will be more charter flights to bring up to 1,000 Floridians home from Israel.
State police in Illinois are urging residents to stay vigilant against hate crimes after a Chicago man allegedly killed a 6-year-old Palestinian Muslim boy.
Police say 71-year-old Joseph Zuber stabbed 6-year-old Wadea Al-Fayoume to death in his apartment and seriously wounded the child's mother. She reportedly told the boy's father that Zuber, the family's landlord, attacked her and her son while yelling, "You Muslims must die."
Authorities have charged Zuber with first-degree murder, attempted murder, and 2 counts of a hate crime. The US Justice Department has also opened a federal hate crimes investigation into that attack.
Around the world, people took to the streets this weekend to show support for both Israelis and Palestinians.
However, pro-Palestinian rallies were most prevalent on Sunday. CNN correspondent Melissa Bell has that.
Palestine will be free!
In Sydney, thousands turned out to express solidarity with Palestinians and oppose Israel's military action in Gaza. The police out in full force as well, with organizers warning that anti-Semitic behavior that had been seen at previous protests would not be welcome. No signs of that chaos here, but the crowd's message to the Palestinian people was loud and clear.
What's a protest going to do except spread awareness and support? We have no legalized any enforceable power to do anything to protect them. Shame on the government who do and don't do anything.
Pro-Palestinian rallies have been held in cities around the world. In France and Germany, where they'd been banned, demonstrators gathered regardless. Some of the largest rallies for Palestinians were held in the Arab world. Thousands attended a rally in Turkey where crowds vented anger at both Israel and the United States. Similar scenes of solidarity in Pakistan.
We are saying from our rallies and all over the Pakistan that Palestinians are not alone.
And in Tunisia, anger that more is not being done to protect Palestinians.
I am as a Palestinian, I am as a son of Gaza, my people facing extermination, and Gaza is being devastated. Where is the international community? Where are the Arabs? Where is the Arab conscience?
In Tokyo, a smaller crowd, but a similar plea.
And I came here to show that we are united now. The Muslims, they are very tired of war and everyone is tired of conflicts and everyone wants justice.
Melissa Bell, CNN, Paris.
Well, thanks for joining us here on CNN Newsroom. I'm Max Foster.
And I'm Bianca Nobilo. Early Start is up next, right here on CNN.
Introducing Finish Ultimate. Engineered for the ultimate clean in the toughest conditions. Dry burnt-on stains. Old dishwashers. Very hard water. Even when you skip the rinse. Its new Cycle Sync technology releases the right ingredient at the right time. And Finish Ultimate breaks down stain, cuts grease, and boosts shine for the ultimate clean, even in the toughest conditions.
Struggling with the highs and lows of bipolar 1? Ask about Vraylar. Because you are greater than your bipolar 1. And you can help take control of your symptoms with Vraylar. Some medicines only treat the lows or highs. Vraylar treats depressive, acute manic, and mixed episodes of bipolar 1 in adults. Proven full spectrum relief for all bipolar 1 symptoms. And in Vraylar clinical studies, most saw no substantial impact on weight. Elderly dementia patients have increased risk of death or stroke. Call your doctor about unusual changes in behavior or suicidal thoughts. Antidepressants can increase these in children and young adults. Report fevers, stiff muscles or confusion, which may mean a life-threatening reaction, or uncontrollable muscle movements, which may be permanent. High blood sugar, which can lead to coma or death, weight gain, and high cholesterol may occur. Movement dysfunction and restlessness are common side effects. Sleepiness and stomach issues are also common. Side effects may not appear for several weeks. Ask about Vraylar and learn how AbbVie could help you save.
Had enough? No. Arthritis. Here. Ask for cream arthritis. Huh. Full prescription strength. Reduces inflammation. Thank the gods. Don't thank them too soon.
Kick pain in the Asper cream.
Sustainably caught salmon in every bite. Jinx is real dog food made by real dog people.
Being a journalist is the best job in the world. Asking challenging questions of the folks who run the world.
Is Ukraine going to win this war?
Yes, of course.
You ready?
The Lead with Jake Tapper, CNN Today at 4.
Guys, how frustrating is it to find a great pair of jeans? Too tight here, too loose there, too long there? Standard jeans use just 2 measurements, and Taylor Custom Jeans use 7 different measurements to give you the perfect fit. Your phone can measure you right now. Download the M-Tailor app on iOS or Android. Choose from hundreds of styles. M-Tailor measures you digitally and is 20% more accurate than a professional tailor. With free shipping and a money-back guarantee, get your new favorite pair of jeans today. M-Tailor, available on the Apple App Store or Android.
That's $78.29.
Oh, I've only got $50. Take out the cheese puffs and the broccoli. I mean, who likes broccoli?
I don't. Only $22.87 to go.
It would be faster with the Empower app. Empower Cash Advance gives you up to $250 instantly. No late fees, interest, or credit checks.
I've got money. Keep the cheese puffs, but leave out the broccoli.
Get Empower Cash Advance up to $250 instantly. Download the Empower app today.
Good day to our viewers in the United States and around the world. I'm Casey Hunt. It's Monday, October 16th, 5 a.m. here in Washington, noon in Israel, where a humanitarian crisis is growing worse in Gaza. With Israel closing all crossings into Gaza, supplies of food, fuel, and medical supplies have been cut off. No fuel means no electricity and no pumps to distribute water. Israel estimates 500,000 people have fled northern Gaza for the south. Israeli officials say that's where they're working with the United Nations to establish a humanitarian zone to provide those vitally needed supplies. With Israel clearly preparing for a ground invasion of Gaza, President Biden said in a 60 Minutes interview aired Sunday, it would be a big mistake for Israel to reoccupy Gaza as part of its effort to eliminate Hamas.
What happened in Gaza, in my view, is Hamas and the extreme elements of Hamas don't represent all the Palestinian people. And I think that it would be a mistake for Israel to occupy Gaza again.
By the numbers, the State Department says 30 Americans have died in the Hamas attack, 13 still unaccounted for. The Israeli military says Hamas is holding a total of 155 hostages in Gaza. CNN's Claire Sebastian is live in London. Claire, good morning to you. The worsening humanitarian situation is pressuring everyone here, as Israel, Hamas, Egypt, the U.S. Is it fair to say it's nothing compared to what might happen after Israel invades?
Yeah, Casey, it's hard to imagine given how bad things are now, but if you look at the size of the force that Israel has amassed, up to 300,000, including reservists, there are tens of thousands on the border with Gaza right now. If you look at the fact that if they go in, which they are sort of heavily hinting that they will, calling this a new phase in the operation that's coming, saying it will involve significant ground operations, then they will be engaging likely not only with Hamas, who has proven itself to be very well prepared for this, but also likely other militant groups in Gaza as well, and that will worsen the humanitarian situation. We know that although Israel says more than 500,000 people have evacuated to the south, as they were told to do a few days ago, many are left, including, according to the World Health Organization, in hospitals. The more vulnerable patients, doctors making the very difficult decision to stay behind to care for them. In addition, it will be increasingly dangerous if this becomes a ground operation to bring aid in, which we know has not yet happened. A lot of focus this morning on the Rafah crossing down in the southern border of Gaza with Egypt. Both sides, Hamas and Israel, denying that a ceasefire or humanitarian corridor has been arranged as of yet, but there are truckloads, plane loads of aid waiting on the Egyptian side, and on the flip side, civilians trying to get out. We've seen live images of civilians waiting at that border this morning. This is why you see the diplomacy intensifying. Secretary Blinken has now arrived back in Israel, will be pushing for more humanitarian assistance and, of course, stepping up efforts, as the U.S. has been doing since the start of this, to try to prevent the conflict from spreading. Casey?
Yeah, extraordinarily important. All right, Claire Sebastian in London for us. Thank you very much for that. And moments ago, Secretary of State Antony Blinken arrived back in Tel Aviv in the latest whirlwind American diplomatic effort aimed at stopping the war in Gaza from expanding. This comes as humanitarian aid deliveries accumulate at Egypt's Rafah border crossing, where thousands are waiting to cross from the Gaza side, including hundreds of Palestinian Americans. After Blinken met with Egypt's president on Sunday, he promised that goods and people would start flowing.
Rafah will be open. We're putting in place with the United Nations, with Egypt, with Israel, with others, the mechanism by which to get the assistance in and to get it to people who need it.
So today Blinken meets with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and their president and the security cabinet. Let's go to CNN's Jennifer Hansler. Jennifer, good morning. There has been a lot of back and forth about the Rafah border crossing here. It doesn't seem to be clear how, when it might open, because the Israelis are saying something different than what it seems the Americans are saying. What's going on for real there, and what is the goal of Blinken's trip?
Well, good morning, Casey. Blinken told reporters yesterday the goal of his trip, he wanted to return to Israel to be able to talk about everything he has heard and learned over his past several days of meetings. We have seen him go to 6 other countries in the past 3 days: Jordan, Qatar, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Egypt. And he wants to be able to brief Netanyahu and those other senior officials on what he learned in those meetings. He also said he wanted to, quote, talk about the way forward with our Israeli allies and friends, and this comes, of course, as the stakes are incredibly high ahead of that imminent ground incursion by Israeli forces, as we have seen 2,600 civilians in Gaza be killed in those Israeli airstrikes, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry, and as the humanitarian situation there is incredibly dire. We expect him to bring up that situation in his meetings today. We saw the Biden administration yesterday appoint a special envoy on those issues. He will likely press Netanyahu on the civilian safe zones that were discussed in their meeting last week. And of course, he will probably discuss the Rafah crossing situation, where there is just so much confusion, as you noted. It is very unclear who is at fault for this holdup, but we have seen hundreds of civilians waiting, some of them days, to try to get out of Gaza into Egypt. U.S. officials have blamed Hamas for the holdup. They say that the group is not letting civilians out. They say Egypt is not the holdup, Israel is not the holdup, but we will likely see him press for especially Americans, Palestinian Americans. We know 500 to 600 of them are in Gaza. Not all of them might want to leave, but some of them do. He will likely press the Israeli leader to figure out how to get these Americans out. And of course, the other key issues he brought up on his trips in all of his meetings was the need for Hamas to release these hostages, for partners who have sway over Hamas to push for that, and also to stop this war from expanding. And it's unclear if he did actually make progress on those fronts. Casey?
Yeah. We were just looking a moment ago at the plane. Anthony Blinken, we're expecting him to deplane in Israel any moment now. And of course, we're also watching to see that we have been reporting that President Biden is considering a trip to Israel, so we're going to update folks on that when we get more. Jennifer Hansler, thank you very much for being with us this morning. I really appreciate your time. And coming up, could there be U.S. boots on the ground in Gaza if the war expands? Plus, divided House Republicans picked Trump ally Jim Jordan as their nominee for Speaker. More on his uphill climb to the gavel.
Lumify?
It's kind of amazing. Wow. Lumify eye drops dramatically reduce redness.
In 1 minute.
And look at the difference. My eyes look brighter and whiter for up to 8 hours. Lumify really works. See for yourself.
How do we decide what hotel to book? Fear not. I got you.
Choice Hotels has a hotel for every type of stay. Like a comfort with the kiddos.
Spacious.
That's what they all say. Stay twice and get a free night when you book direct at choicehotels.com.
Take a pea-sized amount. Apply it like a lotion. Pits, underboob, thigh folds, butt cracks, feet. This water-based cream, I'm telling you, it's invisible on the skin. It works like a dream. Why didn't someone think of this sooner?
Meet Gold Bond Daily Healing, a powerhouse lotion that moisturizes, heals, and smooths dry skin with 7 moisturizers and 3 vitamins. And new Gold Bond Healing Sensitive, clinically shown to heal and moisturize dry, sensitive skin. Gold Bond.
Verizon Small Business Days are coming from October 16th to the 22nd. Now is the time to partner with our experts. Get started today with Verizon Business. It's your business. It's your Verizon.
Sustainably caught salmon in every bite. Jinx is real dog food made by real dog people.
Hi, it's Christina again. I'm here to tell you about an all-new special offer from my friends at Jacuzzi Bath Remodel that you don't want to miss. You already know, Jacuzzi has been making water feel great for more than 65 years. And now, they're bringing you this special TV offer. We're waiving all installation costs and postponing all payments for 1 year. Jacuzzi Bath Remodel has the design you'll love at a price you can afford. And, best of all, they can install it in as little as 1 day with no stress and no mess. Are you ready to see your new shower? Here it is.
It's fabulous.
shower had gone from being a joy to being a burden. I was afraid I would fall. I called, and just one day, I had a shower I could feel safe in.
No matter your situation, Jacuzzi Bath Remodel has a solution for you. From a safer, easy entry shower with features like grab bars and a custom seat to keep you feeling comfortable and independent at home, to a stunning family bath, or how about a luxurious upgrade with a timeless design that will look great for years to come. Plus, they're built to last with a lifetime warranty from an iconic brand you know you can trust.
It was done the same day. We did not have to wait.
It's absolutely perfect. It's exactly what I was dreaming of. If you haven't already experienced what Jacuzzi Bath Remodel can do for you, your family, and your home, don't wait any longer. Now is the best time to call. It's never been easier. Take advantage of this special TV offer today.
Go to jacuzzibathremodel.com or call 800-321-0299. That's 800-321-0299. Call now.
I brought in Ensure Max Protein with 30 grams of protein.
Those who tried me felt more energy in just 2 weeks. Here, I'll take that.
Ensure Max Protein. 30 grams protein, 1 gram sugar, 25 vitamins and minerals, and nutrients for immune health.
Tired of sciatic nerve pain radiating down your leg and lower back? Get relief, finally, with MagnaLife Leg and Back Pain Relief Cream. Fast acting, and yes, it really works. So get living.
Available at your local retailer. There's no plans or intentions to put U.S. troops on the ground to fight in this fight between Israel and Hamas. We are actively trying to find out exactly where they are.
Would you absolutely rule out the possibility of any kind of U.S. forces being on the ground there?
What I won't do is rule anything in or out when it comes to getting our hostages home.
That was National Security Council spokesman John Kirby not ruling out the possibility of U.S. boots on the ground in Gaza. And President Biden calls rescuing the American hostages the top priority. Let's bring in CNN military analyst Colonel Cedric Layton. Colonel, good morning. It's always great to see you. Can I just get your take on how Kirby framed that? What's he saying or not saying there?
Good morning, Casey. I think he is leaving his options open at this point in time. Now, when you look at the relationship between Israel and the United States, it's really very rare for U.S. troops to even come close to going into Israel. Now, there's been training between Israeli forces and American forces in the recent past. In fact, just in the run-up to this particular event, over the last about 8-9 days ago now, and that shows that there's some degree of interoperability between U.S. and Israeli forces. One possibility is that U.S. forces would be used not in a hostage rescue role, but in a humanitarian role. That's one possibility. The other possibility, of course, is a hostage rescue force. But normally, the Israelis would want to take that responsibility themselves and make sure that they were in control of any hostage rescue operation.
That's interesting. I mean, what do you think that U.S. Special Forces could add? I mean, you're basically saying that there's not really anything the U.S. could add to a mission like that. Is that right?
Yeah, the basic thing is this, Casey. U.S. Special Forces are great, but they are not, in that neighborhood. In other words, they have not worked in Gaza. They have not worked in any of those other areas that are under Palestinian control, like in the West Bank, for example. And that has usually been the province of the Israelis. Now, could they do something? Yes, they could train up very quickly and try to do a rescue operation or something like that, but it would be very, very difficult to do that because you're talking a very, very tough target, especially if the hostages are in the tunnels. So I think it's highly unlikely, but nothing is impossible, and so that's something we'll have to keep an eye out for.
Okay. We're all obviously waiting to see, there's this wide expectation Israel is going to launch this ground invasion of Gaza. They've obviously asked people to evacuate, but the Rafah border crossing has been closed. People are kind of massing there. There seems to be a lot of confusion and finger pointing about why it's not open, what's really going on there. Do you have an understanding of how the situation at that crossing plays into Israeli decision-making about the timing of any invasion?
Yeah, so I think what you're looking at is, the Egyptians are saying the border is open, but they know it really isn't because from the Gaza side, Hamas has not opened the gates, and the road to the Rafah crossing area has been damaged in airstrikes. So the Israelis are taking note of that, and they're saying we might not be able to mount an operation at this point in time when there's so many people that have fled from Gaza City in that particular area. I think that what we may be seeing is the possibility that Israel might want to use an avenue of approach not just from the north or the northeast, but possibly one from the south as well. And of course, they'd want people out of the way if they're coming in from the south.
Right. No, it's of course. What is your sense of the other factors at play here? I mean, I know we've seen reports about weather perhaps affecting their timing. I mean, you have an understanding of how militaries make decisions in these kinds of situations. What else are they thinking about?
Yeah, so on the weather point, there is that factor of rain. In fact, this morning in Gaza, it did rain, and that makes it a little bit more difficult for armored vehicles to come into a particular area. It makes it a bit more difficult for other military operations to take place. So depending on the severity of the storm, and I don't think it was that severe, but depending on that could impact operations. One of the most famous ones was D-Day, which was delayed for 24 hours before Eisenhower launched that operation. So weather plays a huge factor in military operations, and the Israelis may be looking at that, waiting perhaps for things to dry out or for something else to happen.
All right, Colonel Cedric Layton, always appreciate your expertise, sir. I really appreciate your time.
You bet, Casey.
All right, right now, America's top diplomat back in Israel after a 6-country Arab tour, what his pitch was and how he was received. Just ahead.
Pro-level performance at work and at home. Right now, save $30 on the BG56 CE blower. Real steel. Find yours.
If you lived or worked at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina for at least 30 days from August 1953 through December 1987 and have been diagnosed with cancer, neurobehavioral effects, fertility issues, or more, you may qualify for financial compensation. A new law passed by Congress now allows veterans and survivors to seek damages for harm from exposure to contaminated water at Camp Lejeune. Call Saddle Rock Legal Group to discuss your case now.
Call 1-800-814-9977.
Verizon Small Business Days are coming from October 16th to the 22nd. Now is the time to partner with our experts. Get started today with Verizon Business. It's your business. It's your Verizon.
Had enough? No. Arthritis. Here. Aspirin arthritis.
Huh. Full prescription strength. Reduces inflammation.
Thank the gods. Don't think them too soon.
Kick pain in the aspirin. No.
Connect with skilled professionals to get all your home projects done well. Get started today at Angie.com.
Find your someone at EliteSingles.com today.
powerful probiotics in every bite. Jinx is real dog food made by real dog people.
Our mission here at CNN is that the news comes first. That's the promise of the Situation Room. We work as hard as we can to get the facts.
The Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer, tonight at 6 on CNN.
Innovation transforms the world, turning the status quo upside down. Innovation created a healthcare system that not only improves the lives of veterans, it transforms the lives of healthcare professionals with unique opportunities to work with industry thought leaders while serving our nation's heroes. The Department of Veterans Affairs, where innovation ensures those who served our nation are served by the very best. See how a career at VA can transform your future.
Hold it!
Imagine a world with no drama.
I haven't signed Jody's card yet.
At 4imprint, finding the promotional products you need to create a memorable moment is an easy mission. Our expert team will take care of every detail to make your success a certainty. Take the drama out of ordering promotional products at 4imprint.com.
4imprint for certain.
I'm Erin Burnett in Tel Aviv, and this is CNN.
Welcome back. Egypt's president says Israel's response to the Hamas attacks has gone beyond self-defense and is now a, quote, collective punishment against Gazans. His concerns were echoed by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Both leaders met with Secretary of State Antony Blinken as he crisscrossed the region over the past several days.
The purpose of seeing all of our partners was first and foremost to listen to them, to hear how they're seeing this crisis, and to look at what we can do together.
All right, let's bring in CNN's Max Foster in London. Max, good morning to you. So Blinken just landed in Israel again. He has also been, of course, working overtime to try to convince Arab leaders to condemn Hamas and to prevent this war from expanding. I mean, it's a Herculean task, and the sort of balance around the sentiment towards what's going on is really on a knife's edge.
Yeah, I mean, the first part of it, asking them to condemn Hamas, isn't as hard as it sounds, because many of these countries aren't fans of Hamas. They obviously are very concerned about Palestinians more generally and the casualties coming from that, and also the effort to get aid in there. It's just not getting in there, and it's a grim situation. You've been reporting on that, of course. We did have this very stark language from the Egyptians talking about this collective punishment, this idea that Israel has a right to defend itself, but it's tipped into collective punishment. That was very stark. And actually, over the course of the morning, we've seen that being echoed around the world, really. We had similar language from the Chinese and even the Irish Prime Minister, would you believe? So this is a real challenge for Israel. So I think he's going to be going back to Israel and saying, you've got to protect civilians. You can't target civilians. You've got to get aid in there. And that's going to be his big challenge right now. I spoke to the IDF earlier today. They made it very clear that civilians aren't their enemy here, and they're doing all they can to protect them. It's Hamas that have made them vulnerable.
Yeah, I mean, that's the argument the Israelis are making are essentially, hey, Hamas is trying to keep these people in their homes so that they can use them as human shields. Now, of course, the reality, we were just showing some video of the Rafah border crossing. There is a lot of confusion about what is going on there because countries are saying the intent is for this to be open, but the reality is we have not seen that. There are, we know from here, Americans that are waiting to cross, Palestinian Americans who would like to leave. I'm sure you're probably more read in than I about, citizens around from the rest of the world who are looking to cross, and obviously you mentioned the humanitarian aid the Egyptians play. I mean, this is the border with Egypt. Where are they in this?
I think fundamentally what is so complex, isn't it? And who knows really what's going on behind the scenes, but the sort of messaging that we're getting is that Egypt won't open the border until there's a promise that aid can get in. And what we're hearing from the Israeli side is that they're not going to open the border until the hostages are released. That's fundamentally, I think, the broad argument there. The Egyptians are obviously hugely concerned about sending their truck drivers in if they're going to be hit by strikes as well. So they want to know there's going to be a ceasefire to protect those aid convoys. And as you say, people are being told to go to the border and gather there. All those dual citizens, American, British, from all around the world, They're being told to gather there because if there is a window for it to open, it's going to be very tight. So they're going to have to rush through, but it's not going to be a big evacuation of people. It just isn't. And a lot of Gazans don't want to leave because they're saying, why should we?
Right, no, of course. And you are right to point out for folks who are trying to decide what to do there, that they are advising people, hey, go be nearby because we're not going to get a lot of warning when it opens, and it's only going to be open for a short period of time. All right, Max Foster, thank you as always, my friend. See you soon. Meanwhile, Iran now warning of consequences if Israel doesn't stop attacks on Gaza. More on fears of an expanding global conflict.
American boots on the ground, but of course, as you say, we have seen this kind of proxy war going on between Iran and Israel for quite some time. Now, you mentioned Hamas, and of course Hezbollah in the south of Lebanon receiving support. There's also Islamic Jihad, and we've already seen some skirmishes with rockets being fired from Hezbollah from southern Lebanon into Israel and causing casualties, and Israel firing back as well. And the real concern is that we would see not only a repeat of the war between Israel and Hezbollah that we saw in 2006, but that it could be much more deadly, because back then Hezbollah fired around 4,000 rockets towards Israel. Now, by some estimates, it's got as many as 150,000 rockets pointed towards Israel, and these will also be of greater quality, much more precision guided for many of those rockets. So there is a danger of a second front opening there. Looking at it from a slightly different side, of course, one of Iran and Israel's biggest issues is over Iran's nuclear program, and it may be that Iran wants Hezbollah to keep its powder dry with those rockets in order to deter Israel taking out Iran's nuclear facilities, something that it has threatened to do over the years. But at the same time, Hezbollah may see this as a golden opportunity, as an opportunity that may not come around in future when Israel is being drawn very likely in on the ground in Gaza, trying to deal with Hamas militants, and of course trying to help those 199, it's now been confirmed, hostages that were taken by Hamas in that terrorist attack and taken into the Gaza Strip. So with Israel, they will be hoping it gets bogged down in Gaza, and that may be seen as an opportunity to attack Israel, and perhaps also to create some tensions between Israel and its allies in the region. Casey?
Right. So, Elliot, can you talk a little bit about the Saudis and how they're involved here? Because they obviously have their own tensions with Iran, and they were about to, we think, sign a normalization pact with Israel.
Right, and of course, we saw the Saudis effectively normalize relations with the Iranians earlier this year, overseen by the Chinese. So that would have caused perhaps some concern. But even the Saudis were not keeping it a secret that they were inching towards some kind of normalization agreement with Israel. I think we also need to bear in mind that what you may see Israel's allies in the region, such as the Emiratis and potentially the Saudis, saying in public, and I think that perhaps the condemnations of Israel will grow even among its allies as the civilian death toll rises in the Gaza Strip. What they say in public may not necessarily be the same as what is going on behind the scenes, and ultimately these countries, including the Saudis, will act in their own interest. And if they feel that ultimately it is in their own interest to normalize with Israel, perhaps not now, perhaps slightly later than had initially been planned, then that is something that is still likely to happen. But no doubt they will be in talks with the Americans, but I don't really see what diplomatic leverage the Saudis have in this fight right now, Casey.
All right, Elliot Gutkind in London for us. Thank you very much for your time, sir. I really appreciate it. And state police in Illinois have arrested a Chicago area landlord after he allegedly stabbed a 6-year-old Muslim boy 26 times, killing him and seriously wounding his mother.
He was a lovely boy who loved his family, his friends. He loved soccer, he loved basketball, and he paid the price for the atmosphere of hate.
Officials say 71-year-old Joseph Zuba faces multiple charges, including first-degree murder, attempted murder, and 2 counts of a hate crime. The mother reportedly told her son's father that Zuba attacked both of them while yelling, quote, "You Muslims must die." All right, a number of House Republicans are in talks to block Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan's path to the speakership, but he is still pushing ahead as of right now for a floor vote tomorrow. Listen to what one Republican had to say about bullying GOP holdouts into supporting Jordan.
What I would really recommend to Jordan's allies too is that a lot of them have mounted this high pressure campaign. They're gonna whip up Twitter against the people who are against Jordan. That is the dumbest way to support Jordan, and I'm supporting Jordan. The dumbest thing you can do is to continue pissing off those people and entrench them.
All right, let's bring in Michael Schnell, congressional reporter at The Hill. Michael, good morning. It's wonderful to have you here. Dan Crenshaw there, being pretty direct about it. There's also some reporting out from one of your Hill press corps colleagues about pressure from Sean Hannity on some of these members. This is getting pretty ugly. How does this play out over the course of the next 24 hours?
Yeah, look, Casey, a lot of converging dynamics right here, all set and focused on Tuesday when House Republicans are planning to bring Jim Jordan's nomination for Speaker to the floor, despite it being unclear that whether or not he has the votes. Of course, last week he beat his challenger, Austin Scott, in that internal election, 124 to 81. But then in a secondary vote, which was seen as a validation vote, asking those lawmakers, would you support Jim Jordan if his nomination came to the floor? The vote was 152 to 55. So, of course, those 55 lawmakers saying that they will not support Jim Jordan on the floor keeps him very far away from being able to clinch the gavel on the House floor. So as you asked, what happens now? Well, Kevin McCarthy said that over the weekend, Jim Jordan has been talking to lawmakers, talking to these holdouts, trying to see how we can get them on board. I think it's safe to say that that will continue today and tomorrow. But as you mentioned, there is this pressure campaign on some of those holdouts to flip and support Jim Jordan. And you saw Crenshaw say right there, someone who supports Jim Jordan, that this pressure campaign is just not the way to move forward. But look, House leaders are planning to have that vote on Tuesday. Time is running out, and Jordan remains far away from the 217 he's going to need on the House floor. So it looks like House Republicans are using any potential, lever at their availability to try to get these holdouts on board.
Right. Well, I mean, it does seem like, this is one thing that Scalise didn't do, right, in his bid for Speaker, is take it to the floor and dare people to vote against him. But that does seem to be the strategy that Jordan is pursuing here, and it echoes what McCarthy did, and it really does seem like McCarthy is working on Jordan's behalf behind the scenes.
Yeah, so two things there. First off, the strategy here, it seems to be, of Jordan's supporters is that bringing his nomination to the floor, even when right now he remains far away from the 217 he needs, they think that that could try to pressure some of these holdouts into actually supporting him. Folks say that when the cameras are on and when the lights are bearing down on these lawmakers, when they have to put their name on their vote, that there's a possibility that they would then support Jim Jordan. But look, when you talk about a number 55, he can only afford to lose 4 lawmakers, and that's assuming that everyone is in the chamber voting, all Democrats vote for Hakeem Jeffries, so he's still very far away from where he needs to be on that vote count. And you bring up another good point, that this is what Kevin McCarthy did back in January. Well, remember, that election took 4 days and 15 ballots. At the end of the day, 6 of those holdouts ended up voting present, which ultimately allowed Kevin McCarthy to get the gavel. The only difference there is that at the beginning of Kevin McCarthy's time on the floor, there were about 20 holdouts, and he was able to bring that down to 6. Right now, we're at 55, which is a much larger number. We'll see if that shrinks if Jim Jordan ultimately does bring it to the floor. But he's sort of starting at beginning at a starting point that's far, far, far back than Kevin McCarthy was.
Yeah, all of course playing out while a war rages in Gaza, and there's no end in sight to this fight to actually install a Speaker of the House so the U.S. government can function. Michael Schnell of The Hill, thank you very much for starting us off on what promises to be a wild week here in D.C. I really appreciate it. And President Biden says the two-state solution isn't dead. We're going to have live reaction from Israel. Up next.
It's true. Contacts are great until they get dry. So we created new BioTrue Hydration Boost for contacts for a boost of moisture that lasts up to 8 hours. So all kinds of contacts can stay comfortable throughout the day. And it's preservative-free. Stay BioTrue to your eyes.
Atlantic salmon, immunity-boosting superfoods, and powerful probiotics in every bite. Jinx is real dog food made by real dog people.
Verizon Small Business Days are coming from October 16th to the 22nd. Now is the time to partner with our experts. Get started today with Verizon Business. It's your business. It's your Verizon.
Okay, I know what you're thinking. That dude's old.
If I had to pick between a 40-year-old kid and a 78-year-old kid, I'd pick the 78 because the 78 has a lot more fun than the 40 had. Older people tend to get pushed to the side. You know, they look at us and go, well, you're over the hill, you can't do anything anymore. But I'm proving that to be not the way it has to be.
Get cool. Thank you for your time. Have a good time. Selfie.
You're never too old to do what's next.
Good morning with Vocalax. Good morning. Yeah. Try Vocalax Chewy Fruit Bites for fast and gentle constipation relief in as little as 30 minutes, making your good morning even better with Vocalax.
Febreze. Hi. I keep my home fresh with Febreze Fade to 5 Plug. And I use this. Febreze has a microchip to digitally control how much scent is released so it doesn't fade. Oh, does mine have a microchip? Oh. Febreze smells first day fresh for 50 days. That's a shockingly long time. Febreze also has a refill reminder light. It even reminds you to refill it? So I never miss a day of freshness. Your home is so fresh. Upgrade to Febreze Plug. La 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 la. With the Freestyle Libre 2 system, know your glucose level and where it's headed without finger sticks. Manage your diabetes with more confidence and lower your A1C. It's covered by Medicare for those who qualify. Ask your doctor about the Freestyle Libre 2 system.
The Whole Story with Anderson Cooper is appointment viewing on Sunday nights. One whole story, one whole hour. The world's best journalists dig deeper into the stories they can't ignore. The Whole Story with Anderson Cooper, Sunday at 8 on CNN.
MJ Lee at the White House, and this is CNN.
Would you support Israeli occupation of Gaza at this point?
I think it'd be a big mistake.
Do you believe that Hamas must be eliminated entirely?
Yes, I do. But there needs to be a Palestinian Authority. There needs to be a path to a Palestinian state.
That was President Biden suggesting that a two-state solution in Israel and Palestine is still possible. Let's bring in Avi Meir, editor-in-chief at the Jerusalem Post. Avi, it's wonderful to have you back on the show. I just want to start there, your reaction to what President Biden had to say.
I think I'd sign on to everything the president said. I think that Hamas does need to be eliminated. I think the massacre last weekend demonstrated that. If ever we thought that it was a pragmatic, rational organization that could be reasoned with, we now know that it's an ISIS-like organization that just needs to be destroyed. And so I think that's absolutely true. I don't think there are many Israelis who, on the other hand, like the president said, have any desire to occupy the Gaza Strip. No one wants to administer that territory. No one wants to control the daily lives of 2 million Palestinians. So I think he's right on that as well. In fact, I think he's right about the prospect of a two-state solution. That's what many Israelis and many Palestinians want, two-state solution, Palestine and Israel living side by side. That's not what Hamas is about. Hamas exists solely to destroy Israel and to murder as many Jews as it possibly can. So that's not a factor. The question is, what do we do the day after Hamas, and how do we get to a point where that peace process is possible?
Avi, can I ask you about what the Egyptian president had to say over the weekend? He said that what Israelis are doing is amounting to collective punishment of people in Gaza. It was a bit of a diplomatic, I don't know if you want to call it a warning shot exactly, but it was kind of a signal to the international community about where they are here. What do you read into that? What do you hear when they say that? And what do you have to say in response?
I'm not sure I'd take those kinds of statements very seriously. I think the president of Egypt and all the leaders in the region, certainly those who are pragmatic and moderate, know the threat posed by Hamas, know that Hamas has for years held the people of Gaza hostage, has used them as human shields in order to develop military and terrorist infrastructure in civilian areas. So I don't know that I would put a great deal of weight in that. I think he has to say that for various internal reasons, perhaps. But at the end of the day, he and Israel and many other moderate states in the region basically see the situation very similarly and know that Hamas needs to be eliminated as a terrorist force in this area.
What do you think needs to be happening at the Rafah border crossing right now? And what are the concerns that Israelis have around that? It seems like people are saying out loud that they want it to be open, but it remains closed. Not 100% clear why, a little bit hard to understand. What's your understanding of it?
I know there are conversations ongoing with the Egyptians to ensure that they are enabling Palestinian civilians to seek safety and shelter into the Sinai through the Rafah crossing. We don't know exactly why that hasn't happened yet. It seems as though the Egyptians are holding out for some concessions or something to sweeten the deal, which I think is terribly unfortunate. If you have a humanitarian situation on your hands, you do whatever you can to get people to safety. That right now is the priority, to ensure that Palestinian civilians are not caught in the line of fire. Israel has done whatever it can, continues to do whatever it can to enable Palestinian civilians to vacate those areas that are being held by Hamas, where they're most entrenched in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, to enable them to seek safety in various different places. There's been a humanitarian corridor that's been established. Time has been given for them to vacate. It's obviously a very difficult situation, which Israel has acknowledged. Israel said, we know that this is a difficult thing. Initially, the suggestion was that it could be done within 24 hours. It was clear pretty early on that that wasn't possible, so Israel said, we're going to extend this for as long as it takes to enable civilians to get out of this area and seek shelter.
Right. Avi, I mean, we're obviously waiting for this ground invasion, which seems like it could come at any moment. You obviously are knit into the fabric of your country. Hundreds of thousands of reservists have been called up, and for people who aren't familiar, I mean, it's basically everyone in the country, right, serves in the military. What's the feeling ahead of this? I mean, do people feel like it's imminent? It promises to be a very, very difficult operation, potentially with a lot of loss of life.
I'm actually in southern Israel, on my way down to the areas in which the troops are being assembled to get a sense of what's going on the ground. I can tell you that I have seen several places along the way in which the roads are lined with parked cars of reservists who've come, reported to duty, and are ready for the battle ahead. There has been a massive mobilization, by the way, not only of Army reservists, but really of the entire country, to support them, to support the residents of southern Israel who've been devastated over the past week after the massacre of last weekend. We know that it will be difficult. We know that there will likely be Israeli casualties when we go in with ground forces. It's obviously easier for Israel to just, carpet bomb Gaza. Of course, it would never do that because it knows that would draw tremendous civilian casualties. So it will endanger its own soldiers in order to go in by foot and possibly sustain casualties. We know that lies ahead, but that's what we know we need to do in order to ensure that Hamas is eliminated and the people of Israel can live in peace.
All right, Avi Mayer, thank you very much for being with us this morning. I really appreciate your time, sir. Stay safe.
Thank you.
And Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is in Israel, saying he would push forward an aid package for the Jewish state, despite the chaos in Washington over the speakership. The Biden administration faces a key issue, of course, the divide in Congress over aid for both Israel and Ukraine. The president seems confident that they can get both done at the same time. Take a look.
Are the wars in Israel and Ukraine more than the United States can take on at the same time?
The United States of America, for God's sake. The most powerful nation in the history, not in the world, in the history of the world. The history of the world. We can take care of both of these and still maintain our overall international defense.
For God's sake. Let's bring in Catherine Lucy, White House reporter at the Wall Street Journal. Catherine, good morning. Thank you very much for being here. So President Biden says, okay, we're going to do both of these things at the same time. I mean, the reality is, we're talking about money and advice. We're not talking about boots on the ground. But that said, getting the money out the door for both of these places at the same time is potentially tricky. And right now it's impossible because there's no Speaker of the House. How do you see this playing out?
That's right, Casey. I mean, this would be hard with a functioning Congress, right? And at the moment, the president is not dealing with a functioning Congress. And he said in that interview that the dysfunction among Hill Republicans isn't helping. The White House is working on this. Lawmakers were at the White House on Friday. The White House is talking about an aid package that would include Israel and Ukraine and some other security challenges. And their thinking and their hope is that by sort of bundling this all together, it'll be easier to get aid for Ukraine, which Republicans, so far have, some of them have resisted. But it's not clear. One, again, the Congress needs to function, but it's also not clear if they can get support for both of these priorities. And there are, I think it's important to note, divides and tensions within both parties, right? So, in Congress, the Republicans are more united on aid for Israel, but have divisions on supporting Ukraine. And, Democrats are supportive largely of helping Ukraine, but there are some tensions in their caucus about what to do with Israel. And so it's a very thorny problem for the president. And we're going to see what plays out this week in terms of, Congress actually getting going again.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and look, the idea that a speaker, Jim Jordan, is going to put, Ukraine aid on the floor, no matter what form it takes. I mean, maybe he'll ultimately be jammed. But I see the White House trying to work with a speaker, Jim Jordan, is going to be harder than trying to work with a speaker, McCarthy. Catherine, there's a new CNN poll that shows Americans are very sympathetic towards Israelis, 96% expressing at least some sympathy, and at least 70% see the Israeli government's response to these attacks as justified. Obviously, the White House will probably publicly, they don't pay attention to polling, but the reality is they're doing kind of research and looking into this all the time. I mean, how much does public sentiment play into how they handle these things?
Well, the president has been very clear about, he keeps using the phrases like rock solid support for Israel. I don't see that changing. He has been very vocal about that. And he sees support for Israel in the way that he sees support for Ukraine, right, as a really sort of foundational support of democracies and the importance of the U.S. supporting democracies. But certainly the White House, this president is running for re-election. The White House is aware of how the public is thinking about these things. And it's helpful for the president if this moment is supported. Foreign policy tests matter on the campaign trail, right? And so this is something that they
the former president, George W. Bush, talking a little bit about how public sentiment could change and how Biden might face tough going ahead. He obviously had some experience with that, so we'll see if that comes to pass. Catherine Lucy of the Wall Street Journal, thank you very much for being here, my friend. I hope you'll come back. And the Palestinian Authority president denouncing the Hamas terror attack, but not everyone in Gaza might have heard that. We're going to explain.
Find your someone at EliteSingles.com today.
Verizon Small Business Days are coming from October 16th to the 22nd. Now is the time to partner with our experts. Get started today with Verizon Business. It's your business. It's your Verizon. So many hotels.
Trouble booking the family vacation? Come on. Comforto's free hot breakfast for the whole fam. They have waffles. And splendid pools. Book direct at choicehotels.com.
Struggling with the highs and lows of bipolar 1? Ask about Vraylar. Because you are great. greater than your bipolar 1. And you can help take control of your symptoms with Vraylar. Some medicines only treat the lows or highs. Vraylar treats depressive, acute manic, and mixed episodes of bipolar 1 in adults. Proven full-spectrum relief for all bipolar 1 symptoms. And in Vraylar clinical studies, most saw no substantial impact on weight. Elderly dementia patients have increased risk of death or stroke. Call your doctor about unusual changes in behavior or suicidal thoughts. Antidepressants can increase these in children and young adults. Report fever, stiff muscles or confusion, which may mean a life-threatening reaction, or uncontrollable muscle movements, which may be permanent. High blood sugar, which can lead to coma or death, weight gain, and high cholesterol may occur. Movement dysfunction and restlessness are common side effects. Sleepiness and stomach issues are also common. Side effects may not appear for several weeks. Ask about Vraylar and learn how AbbVie could help you save. Good morning with Gocalax. Good morning. Yeah. Try Gocalax Chewy Fruit Bites for fast and gentle constipation relief in as little as 30 minutes, making your good morning even better with Gocalax.
Stars Play in Abu Dhabi is the region's leading streaming service that brings you the magic of films and the excitement of sports to your favorite device, be it television or your mobile phone. With a business like ours, we need a range of talent, from technology as well as creative. We found Abu Dhabi to be our hub for accessing that type of talent.
Sustainably caught salmon in every bite. Jinx is real dog food made by real dog people.
Does someone who threatens Putin's power ever die unintentionally in Russia?
I don't think so. He just leaves all this carnage in his wake.
Do you think he cares about that?
No, he doesn't.
The Source with Caitlin Collins, tonight at 9.
Here's your parachute. Packed it myself.
Certain it's okay?
Mm-hmm.
Are you foreign print certain?
Certainty matters, like the certainty of congratulating coworkers or saying thank you for being a customer. With promotional products from 4imprint, our expert team is dedicated to making your satisfaction a certainty.
Talk to myself.
Land the perfect products at 4imprint.com.
4imprint for certain. Ooh, Tracy, look. She's going for the bin.
Oh my, look at her scoop.
Thank you.
Hey, Stacy, what do you think he's doing with that bottle?
Oh no, he's gonna throw it in the trash. I can't look.
Wait. He's putting it in his bag to recycle later.
Way to go, Mr. Brown Shoes.
Hey, up here.
Who's this? I could watch humans all day long.
We are, and we do.
Join Poppy and Phil on CNN This Morning. Next.
You are looking at live pictures of Gaza City, smoke rising over Gaza City. That's happening in just the past 5 minutes or so as the Israeli bombardment of the Gaza Strip continues ahead of an expected ground invasion. Meanwhile, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas making his first clear denunciation of the deadly Hamas attacks in Israel in a call with Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, saying that those actions, quote, do not represent the Palestinian people. But later, the official Palestinian news agency scrubbed the direct reference to Hamas from President Abbas's remarks with no explanation. CNN's Scott McLean is live in London with more. Scott, what's going on here?
Hey, Casey, let me give you the play-by-play. So last week, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, the PA, Palestinian Authority, by the way, runs things in the West Bank, not in Gaza. He put out a statement saying that, look, we reject the killing of civilians on both sides. We reject mutilation of bodies, saying that such practices violate international law, morals, and religion. That was last week's statement. Yesterday, as you pointed out, he went even further than that, being quite direct and quite clear when it comes to Hamas's actions in Israel, saying that the policies, quote, the policies and actions of Hamas do not represent the Palestinian people. So this is a pretty in-your-face, pretty clear denunciation of what Hamas has done. This morning, though, the write-up or the readout of that call with Nicolas Maduro in the official Palestinian press agency WAFA write-up was taken out. It was replaced with this. quote, no other party represents the Palestinian people except that of the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the multi-party umbrella organization headed by Mahmoud Abbas and his Fatah party in the West Bank, claiming to represent the Palestinian people. The PLO does not include Hamas. Hamas and the PLO have not seen eye to eye for some time. They really fell out back in 2007 when Hamas violently, in the violent clashes, booted the PLO and the Fatah party from Gaza, leaving them in control of only the West Bank. But the bottom line, Casey, is why this was taken out, we still don't know. A lot of question marks here.
Indeed. All right, Scott McLean, thanks very much for your reporting. I really appreciate it. And thanks to all of you for joining us this morning. I'm Casey Hunt. Don't go anywhere. CNN This Morning starts right now.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Good morning, everyone. Glad you're with us. I'm Poppy Harlow with Phil Mattingly in New York. Aaron Burnett live with us again in Tel Aviv, Israel. It is 6 a.m. here in New York, 1 p.m. in Israel, where right now Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Jerusalem. He is meeting once again with Israeli leaders, and we're also looking at these live pictures of smoke billowing above Gaza City. A dire humanitarian crisis that's unfolding there at this moment, and an Israeli ground offensive appears to be imminent this morning. Blinken said just a short time ago that the U.S. is, quote, actively working to ensure that humanitarian assistance like water, food, and medicine can get into Gaza.
Secretary of State also saying yesterday that a safe passageway into Egypt via the Rafah crossing would be open, as 500,000 people have fled northern Gaza for the south. But overnight, those negotiations seem to have stalled. The Israeli Prime Minister's office saying, quote, at the moment there is neither a ceasefire nor humanitarian assistance in the Gaza Strip in return for the exit of foreigners. President Biden toeing a thin line, saying that Israel must go after Hamas, while also warning Israel against occupying Gaza.
Israel is going after a group of people who engage in barbarism that is as consequential as the Holocaust. And so I think Israel has to respond. They have to go after Hamas.
Would you support Israeli occupation of Gaza at this point?
I think it'd be a big mistake. Look, what happened in Gaza, in my view, is Hamas and the extreme elements of Hamas don't represent all the Palestinian people. And I think that it would be a mistake for Israel to occupy Gaza again.
Do you believe that Hamas must be eliminated entirely?
Yes, I do. But there needs to be a Palestinian Authority. There needs to be a path to a Palestinian state.
Also, this just in, Israel now says 199 people are being held hostage in Gaza. That is their latest count. We're covering all of this all around the world. Let's begin with Erin. She's live in Tel Aviv. That is quite an increase from what they had thought before in terms of those sort of. I wonder if that also indicates, Erin, that their intelligence is getting a little bit better there.
You know, Poppy, that's a really good point, because as you point out, 199, that's about 50 more than they had been saying over the past few days. The number has been a bit amorphous, but 199 hostages that they say are still there. Now, in conversations with Israeli military, they are honest that they don't know how many of them are alive or dead. The most detail they've given us on this is to say that they believe some of them may have actually died as they were being brought from Israel into Gaza. But that's the most we've been able to get. While there have been reports that maybe a dozen hostages were killed in strikes, there has been no confirmation of that. We have absolutely no visibility on that, other than that we understand from the IDF that they're being held in tunnels sort of scattered around Gaza, that Hamas has not been known to use before, and that's still the very latest that we have on that. But as you point out, a very significant increase, and Poppy, it could point out more intelligence, it could point out more negotiations going on, that they actually have a real sense of the number, but it's impossible to really put details around what it means. All we can say is that that number is a huge increase, and talking to some of those families, the heartbreak is truly horrible to hear.
Aaron, at the same time, you just heard explosions where you are a few moments ago. Can you tell us what happened?
Yes, so we heard some explosions, and frankly, we've been hearing quite a few explosions just over the past 12, 16 hours, I would say, that actually don't come along with air raid sirens. And that's because the Israeli Iron Dome, the air raid sirens, there's actually an app for it that you can follow, is very specific as to where an exact risk of a hit is. So when you hear a siren, you move fast. The rockets aren't traveling far, so you move very quickly to shelter because it really could be a real risk to you. When you don't hear a siren, you may hear very loud booms and thuds, as we do, but it's because the Iron Dome, sort of with the math and the algorithm, have determined that it isn't a risk to the direct location. So we have heard plenty of those. Also, Israeli helicopters, military helicopters have been flying over in these past few moments, and fighter jets, low and very audible. Sometimes they're a little higher up, Phil. As they go into Gaza for strikes, there have been some lower, much louder ones in the early hours of dawn this morning. And as you said, it's about 1 o'clock here right now. As we await for the possibility of a ground invasion truly at any time, keep in mind what those jets come with. Yesterday, 250 airstrikes alone, just yesterday in Gaza. So when we hear those jets, it is followed a few seconds later by an explosion and, of course, the devastation that means in Gaza.
Aaron, we know Secretary Blinken, U.S. Secretary of State, back in Israel today in Jerusalem, meeting with leaders there. All of this around these conflicting reports about that critical crossing, the only possible one at this point out of Gaza into Egypt, the Rafah crossing in the south. What is the status of that being open? It was supposed to be open for Americans this weekend.
Right, it was, and then, of course, it wasn't, and it is the topic of all of the negotiations. Secretary Blinken obviously going to be talking about that here. He's been in Egypt with El-Sisi there and having that conversation as well. They want a humanitarian corridor. They want Americans out of Gaza. There are a lot of Americans and Palestinian Americans in Gaza, and that is even separate, of course, from the broader humanitarian crisis you're talking about. Secretary Blinken obviously was here on Friday and then on Thursday, and then traveling through the region, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, desperately trying for some sort of diplomacy. Then coming back here, it was announced late yesterday, so he's here now in a meeting with the Prime Minister. There was a senatorial delegation here last night. Senator Romney was here, Senator Kelly, and Majority Leader Schumer. And they told me, I asked Senator Schumer, why was Blinken coming back? Was the purpose of this perhaps to get Prime Minister Netanyahu to stall or to slow down, to bring this down a notch? His view was no. That's not the purpose at all, that Secretary Blinken is here primarily to try to keep diplomacy in the region on track, but not to try to influence in any way the decisions that Netanyahu may make on the timing of this anticipated ground invasion of Gaza. And ahead of that, of course, you talk about the Gaza refugees and getting people out of there. There is, of course, a broader sort of evacuation going on in Israel itself. A flight with nearly 300 Americans on board who were previously stranded in Israel actually left overnight. That flight went to Tampa, Florida overnight. We're also aware, after Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed an executive order for charter flights for Floridians trapped in Israel. And DeSantis went then there. It was a real publicity moment for him on the runway. And the United States is helping more Americans evacuate Israel. As you all know, it's hard, right? There is no Lebanese border. There is no Syrian border that you can cross, no Saudi border, right? You've got to go Jordan, or you've got to go by sea. And so they have a ship, 10 to 12 hours on this giant evacuation ship from the U.S. military from Haifa going to Cyprus. Our Natasha Bertrand is live at the Pentagon. Natasha, this is almost, it's basically a military cruise ship. Tell us what you know.
Yeah, that's right, Aaron. So the U.S. making an effort here to try to evacuate civilians and citizens, U.S. citizens who do want to leave. And what we're told is that it's going to be departing from Haifa, and actually it was boarding earlier this morning around 1 a.m. Eastern time. And it is about 10 to 12 hours from Haifa to Cyprus. It has to be only U.S. nationals and their immediate family members. And then once these U.S. citizens get to Cyprus, if they do not have the ability to arrange their own travel onward, then the U.S. is going to be arranging for charter flights for them to continue with their onward journey there. Now, it's important to note that this is not a non-combatant evacuation operation as such that the military, for example, carried out in Afghanistan when U.S. citizens were trying to flee at that point. This is a smaller effort. It is organized by the U.S. State Department, and the State Department issued that alert just yesterday saying that they were going to be organizing this evacuation for citizens who want to leave. Now, we should note that we first reported earlier this weekend that the U.S. military is putting a Marine Expeditionary Unit kind of on standby, preparing them for the possibility that they might have to deploy closer to Israel in the event that there is that demand signal from U.S. citizens who want to depart Israel en masse. So right now they have not gotten that order. This Marine Expeditionary Unit is capable of helping to support large-scale evacuations, and that is actually one of their mission essential tasks. They have not gotten that order yet. The White House has said that they have not seen yet the demand signal from U.S. citizens trying to leave Israel. Remember, a lot of these people are dual citizens, so they don't necessarily want to leave the country, but they are preparing for that possibility if they need to, Erin.
So, Natasha, why is the U.S. sending a second carrier strike group to the eastern Mediterranean Sea? Just when you think about the air power, doubling the air power almost that would make available to the U.S. military in the region, what does that actually signal in terms of the posture and the way the U.S. sees as a potential for escalation?
Yeah, Erin, this is a huge show of force. I mean, even the first aircraft carrier, which arrived in the region earlier this week, that was very significant. But now to have a second aircraft carrier heading towards the eastern Mediterranean, that is extremely significant. And it is really a sign that the U.S. is concerned about the possibility that additional groups, additional actors will try to join this conflict. And so it is meant as a deterrent, primarily against Hezbollah, that Lebanese militant group that the U.S. has expressed so much worry about, that the possibility that they could open a new front in this conflict. Of course, Iran, which backs Hezbollah and also backs Hamas, also very concerned that they could get involved somehow. So 2 aircraft carriers, strike carriers in this region, really significant, a sign that the U.S. is trying to show a really forceful sign of deterrence, Erin.
Natasha, thank you very much at the Pentagon this hour. Poppy and Phil, back to you.
Erin, thank you very much. And we also just learned that Secretary of State Antony Blinken will not only meet with Netanyahu and the Israeli President Isaac Herzog, he's also going to meet with the opposition leader there and the defense minister of Israel. So a lot of key meetings still ahead for the Secretary of State. Joining us now, former White House foreign policy advisor in the George W. Bush administration, Dan Senor. Dan, it's great to have you, especially on a day like this. I want to get to the Biden interview in a moment, but there is mass confusion, as Erin just reported, over the southern crossing, the only potentially possibly safe way for Palestinians, Americans to get out of Gaza. Can you explain what is happening right now diplomatically? Because Saturday it was supposed to be open for 5 hours for Americans to get out, and it wasn't, and the blame was on Hamas. But what can be done?
Going on. Hamas doesn't really want the Palestinians leaving, because the way they wage their war is they co-locate civilians, large concentrations of civilians, with their weapons capabilities. So the UN-run schools in Gaza have Hamas's weapons. They know if Israel tries to take out Hamas's weapons, they're going to hit the UN-run schools. They put their command centers, the military command centers, in hospitals, because they know if Israel tries to hit a command center, they can say, look, you hit a hospital. So the last thing they want is dispersing the Palestinians to other parts of Gaza, to southern Gaza. That makes it harder for Hamas to use them as human shields. Egypt doesn't want all these Palestinians coming in over the Rafah border. They say this is a humanitarian plight, and we should look after the Palestinians, needs and their humanitarian needs. But the one easy way to do it is to move them across the Rafah border into Egypt, and they don't want to do that. Now, what Egypt is doing is trying to move, apparently, food and other healthcare supplies into Gaza. Israel's letting them do that. That's tricky because you don't know who controls them once you send them into Gaza. So is Hamas in control of them? Are terrorists getting access to those supplies? So the southern border is a mess. The single best move would be for the Egyptian, the Sisi government, to say, we will take in Palestinians. We will create refugee areas. We will create 10 cities. It's worked in other parts of the world. He says it's very costly, it's very expensive, but as we've seen from Ukraine to the war in Syria, international community spent enormous amounts of money absorbing these people, so no single country had to absorb
And the
them.
UN RWA is already setting up, and they have people now positioned there in northern Egypt in the hope that this will open.
Right. And like I said, there's precedent for Egypt not absorbing all the costs. Sisi knows that. he's slow walking it.
But they're domestic security concerns as well. And I think this is, to your point, what they say publicly, what Sisi says publicly versus what his considerations are internally,
right?
Oftentimes diverge from one another. And I think that is a driver as well to not wanting a large...
And if that's his concern, he should say it. But what he shouldn't do is say that this is Israel's fault. Because he's, to your point, these are security concerns that he has, which is fine. And again, the international community can help him with that.
I want you to listen to two things that Secretary Blinken said. The first is in that critical press conference with Netanyahu, and the second was yesterday in Egypt. Listen to how they echo one another.
As the Prime Minister and I discussed, how Israel does this matters.
The way that Israel does this matters. Needs to do it in a way that affirms the shared values that we have for human life and human dignity, taking every possible precaution to avoid harming civilians.
Intentional that he said it both times in that way, and the real question is, what will the U.S. support in terms of how Israel does it? They have said they are in lockstep, no matter what.
Right. Well, no, I think the comparison that President Biden made in his speech and his press statement last week, where he kept comparing Israel to ISIS. All right, now, when the U.S. comparing Hamas, thank you. When comparing Hamas to ISIS, when the United States, over the course of 3 administrations, right, the Obama administration, the Trump administration, the Biden administration, went to wipe out ISIS, they obviously didn't want casualties. They didn't want civilians to be killed. But there was collateral damage in war that is inevitable, and that did not slow them down from taking out ISIS. You've heard President Biden make these repeated comparisons to the Holocaust, right, that what Hamas has done to Israel is the worst suffering of Jews anywhere in the world in any single day since the Holocaust. We were concerned, obviously, America and the UK and our allies were worried about civilian casualties in fighting World War II, but obviously there are civilian casualties and there's collateral damage. So these declarations that Israel should be mindful, of course Israel should be mindful, but to my earlier point, how do you be mindful when they're putting their offensive capabilities in hospitals and UN-run schools? And at the end of the day, that's the dilemma that Israel faces.
Cutting off water, electricity.
Yeah.
The question is, could you strategically put it on to hospitals, for example?
Or could you move it to the southern part of Gaza, where Israel's trying to get the Palestinians in Gaza to move to?
Yeah.
Here's where I struggle with the ISIS analogy, and correct me if I'm wrong on this. They had a caliphate that they had created amongst themselves, but when they were taken out, there were governing structures and infrastructure there in Iraq, Syria, it's a little debatable to some degree, to fill the vacuum or to retake control. The president, in that 60 Minutes interview, saying he would be opposed to Israel occupying Gaza. There's a very real reason that Israel pulled out of occupation of Gaza. And so I think my big question, particularly if you're going to point to ISIS, is, okay, who fills this vacuum?
Right. Well, so first of all, when ISIS was driven out of those areas like Raqqa, there was a massive vacuum. There was no strong governing authority in places like Syria and elsewhere that could really fill that.
One did exist, at least in Iraq.
Yeah. Okay. But it was weak. Sure. And of course, the U.S. went in saying, look, we got to wipe out ISIS. ISIS poses an enormous threat to the West. We're going to wipe out ISIS, and then we will figure out how to fill the vacuum. But you can't say we're not going to learn to live with ISIS until we figure out what's going to succeed ISIS. I just think after what Israel went through over the past week, right? Babies beheaded, babies burned, women's raped, en masse, like Jew hunting. The idea that Israel should be told, you're going to have to learn to live with this entity here until we figure out what succeeds it. There are possibilities for who succeeds it. The Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, which used to be in control in Gaza before Hamas broke them out, could be reestablished in Gaza. There's a whole range of options, but this is an existential threat to Israel. Israeli leaders are dealing with the worst threat to Israel's existence since the 1973 Yom Kippur War. The idea that they should wait and learn to live with this threat that's on their border.
We have to go. I'm not saying that they have to wait. I'm just saying that foresight or trying to think through what happens next is a pretty critical component.
Except they didn't choose the timing of this. Right. This was just thrust upon them. They had a security doctrine that was learning to coexist effectively with Hamas for 2 decades since Israel pulled out in 2005. And then this happened. And the idea that the rug gets pulled out from Israel, and Israel's supposed to say, well, you got to figure out what comes next. Israel says, no, we have to protect our citizens from the Jew hunting that we saw last weekend or 8 days ago. We will do that. We will protect our security, and then we'll deal with what follows.
Just quickly before you go, you weren't advisor to President Bush, but you think this week for Biden has been what?
I think it's been one of, if not the best weeks of his presidency. I think he has spoken with moral clarity, and I'm often a critic of his. The language he has used both in his press statement earlier this week and in the 60 Minutes interview last night was not only clear-headed, but was actually quite moving, and I think he has established goalposts. There will be moments where governments around the world, including the U.S., will be critical of what Israel does in the weeks ahead. But President Biden put down markers. He compared what Israel is going through to the Holocaust. As we said earlier, he's compared what Israel is experiencing as the threat that ISIS posed to the West. Once you establish those markers, and I think he comes at it sincerely, as you and I were talking about it off camera, President Biden has taken his grandchildren, every single one of them, to visit concentration camps. I think he feels this, and once he puts down those markers, I think it's going to be very hard to be critical of Israel as it takes its next steps.
Dan Zeno, thank you very much. Great to have you.
Well, the ground operation in Gaza is expected soon. We're going to hear from an IDF spokesman on what's being done to free the hostages held by Hamas and how the threat of severe weather would actually impact the Israeli battle plans. That's next.
This is American infrastructure, a prime target for cyber attacks. But the same AI-powered security that protects all of Google also defends these services for everyone who lives here. An official message from Medicare.
Often, things look the same. Exactly.
Southern part of Gaza, many hoping they can cross at some point through the Rafah crossing into Egypt, but it is still closed this morning. One of those people moving south, Dr. Barbara Zinn, she's an American pediatric oncologist who is visiting Gaza, helping Palestinian children with the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund. You heard from her on CNN last week. She was on air with us as a bomb went off. Listen.
Well, whenever you go to Gaza, you always know that there's danger of some violence while you're there, but no, I wasn't prepared for this. I started.
We were also hoping to be joined by her this morning. We were unable to contact her because the Wi-Fi is just very spotty. Her son did message with her just a couple of hours ago, though. The last he heard, his mother was at a UN building about 5 miles from that southern border with Egypt. Joining us now is her son, Daniel Preston, who joins us. I really appreciate you being here. We've gotten to hear from your mother a couple of times on CNN over the past week. What is the update you can share with us as she moves south and hopes to be able to leave?
Yeah, I think she's about 5 miles from the border right now, and because the main UN facility was so full, I think there are about 10,000 people around. They're currently at a vocational school. I think they're sort of sleeping in their cars, ready to go at any minute. I've been told they've been sleeping with their shoes on. Just anytime they can hear the border is open, they'll get there. I think they have some food and water. I know that there's a pretty good shortage of bottled water right now, but they still have some well water to be drinking from.
Has she talked to you at all about whether potable water has been accessible outside of drinking water, electricity, etc.? That's been one of the big points of debate, right? Israel had said that they turned on the water to southern Gaza, but without electricity, you can't get it running again. What has she told you?
Yeah, it sounds like they have one workable spigot in the area that has pretty long lines at it, and that, right, most of the facilities are out. I think the UN has sort of one thing that they can use. Yeah.
You know what I think is so striking about your mother, and it's been an honor for all of us to get to hear from her throughout this. She went into Gaza knowing there would be some risk. Certainly not this, but some risk. But in many respects, she was born to do work like this.
Yeah, I think it's been interesting to see how sort of she's developed from the fact that, right, so her mother was escaped, her family escaped anti-Jewish persecution in Belarus and in Eastern Europe, and her father's family escaped religious persecution in Iran and a war in southern Lebanon, and so I think that she's grown up with this feeling of the family running away and knowing what that's like, and so I think going back and helping people in that same situation has been something that's really close to her as she's she's grown as a doctor, and I mean, just doing rural medicine in America too is honestly pretty tough as well. Yeah.
You know, we're just looking at pictures of the two of you together sort of around the world. I just, before you go, I wonder if in your conversations with her, she has struggled with leaving, right? She knows she has to go, but at the same time, she's a pediatric oncologist. The whole reason she went is to help children in the most dire of situations, and this is the most dire of situations. I wonder how she wrestles with that.
Yeah, I think that's really hard. I mean, I think one thing that has been hard for her to see firsthand is for a lot of work she does, it's with kids with chronic illnesses, right? Kids who need chemo or sort of constant checking on different biological things. So when you have attacks like this, when you have violence like this, the infrastructure is gone too. So while there's a lot of medical need in Gaza, it's a lot of very much like primary care and things like that. And what really is just impossible in these situations is really the work that she goes over there to do, because there's no way that you can have kids on chemo right now or care for things that aren't immediate actionable things that for health, but are things that she's going to do. So in a lot of ways, she can't even do what she went there to do right now.
It's a very important point. Danielle, Preston, thank you. Hope she gets home safe to you very soon. Appreciate you being with us.
Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
President Biden says the dysfunction in Washington is making the U.S. less safe. What he said about the impact of the political ineptitude here at home.
Also, it is Monday, and the House of Representatives is still without a speaker. We'll talk to you about where the votes now stand and how likely this could last, what Democrats are proposing.
This is spring semester, and Fairfield is soon unified. They switched to Google Tools for education because there's never been a reported ransomware attack on a Chromebook. Now they're focused on learning, knowing that their data is secure.
Do you struggle with occasional nerve aches in your hands or feet? Try Nervive Nerve Relief from the world's #1 nerve care company. Nervive contains ALA to relieve nerve aches and B-complex vitamins to fortify healthy nerves. Try Nervive and try Nervive Pain Relieving Roll-On.
Is Ukraine going to win this war?
To bring the stories that matter to the masses.
What does human talent look like?
Just go on Fiverr. See for yourself.
Wow. Imagine working with them.
Yeah, imagine that. Hire a freelancer and take your business to the next level.
I started experiencing ED. I knew I had to do something about it.
You go online, you answer the medical questions.
The medication is at my house within a couple of days.
Because it is effective, I say I'm on a second honeymoon.
Get started today with RexMD.com.
If you drive a personal car for work and don't keep track of your business miles, you're missing out on thousands of tax deductions or reimbursements. MileIQ is an app that can help. It automatically logs and calculates your business miles from your phone. Get started at MileIQ.com for free today.
I'm Natasha Bertrand at the Pentagon, and this is CNN.
Closed captioning brought to you by Mesobook.com.
We only represent mesothelioma victims and their families. Call for a free book.
Call 800-282-4444 or go to Mesobook.com.
Does the dysfunction that we've seen in Congress increase the danger in the world?
Yes. Look, this is not your father's Republican Party. 30% of it is made up of these MAGA Republicans who are maybe... Democracy is something they don't look at it the same way you and I look at democracy.
That was President Biden speaking last night on 60 Minutes about the infighting among House Republicans nearly 2 weeks after Kevin McCarthy was ousted as Speaker. Now, Congressman Jim Jordan, who's hoping to succeed McCarthy, is working the phones throughout the course of the weekend, going into today, trying to bring holdouts to his side ahead of a full House vote that could happen on Tuesday. Let's go to CNN's Lauren Fox live on Capitol Hill. Lauren, break it down. Does he have anywhere near the numbers that he needs to actually clinch the speakership?
Yeah, Phil, he's not there yet. That is what we are learning from conversations over the weekend. And one thing to be clear on is the holdouts right now are not the hardliners that you might be used to seeing from past iterations of this fight, but instead some moderates and more establishment Republicans who are deeply concerned about Jim Jordan potentially being rewarded after many of his backers tried to block Steve Scalise and were successful in Scalise not getting the speakership last week. So there's so much bad blood, so much tension, so much frustration right now within Republican ranks that this could go on for a while. Right now, House Republicans are slated to meet behind closed doors around 6:30 p.m. tonight. This is one of many meetings we have seen over the course of the last several weeks among House Republicans, and yet they are no closer to electing a speaker. As you noted, Jordan's office is making very clear that he's having conversations, he is trying to move members, but the biggest question right now is you have a block of members who are arguing that they may go to the floor and block Jim Jordan. One of the questions has been, if you went to the floor, would members start to get to yes on whatever candidate was before them? But what we are hearing from our sources is the fact that actually that is not going to happen because some of these members are dug in, saying that they are never going to support Jim Jordan. A lot can change in Congress as this war in Israel continues and this goes on and on and on. There becomes a question of when do Republicans come together and say enough is enough, we need to find someone. But at this moment, it doesn't look like Jim Jordan has the support he needs.
All right, Lauren Fox for us. Keep us posted. Thank you. Well, strong words from President Biden after the murder of a 6-year-old Muslim American boy. We have a live report from Chicago on the hate crime investigation. That's next.
Also, the president issuing this warning about how the war in the Middle East could increase threats here at home.
Because of what we're seeing in the Middle East is the threat of terrorism in the United States increased.
Yes.
Crimes charges after he reportedly stabbed the child 26 times. He killed him and seriously wounded his mother. Whitney Wild has the reporting live from Chicago for us. Whitney, my God.
It's awful, Poppy. It's really horrible. Here's what police describe.
Prejudiced maniac. Prejudiced, biased maniac.
Sitting outside the family's home near the driveway, and when they walked into this home, it's difficult to describe the horror they were walking into. They said they found the two
Prejudiced maniac.
in a bedroom. The mother had been stabbed more
Prejudiced
than a dozen
maniac.
times. The little boy had been stabbed 26 times. Both were rushed to the hospital. The mother is expected to survive, but sadly, that little boy was killed in this incident. Again, police
Prejudiced maniac.
have enough information about this incident to charge this man with hate crimes, although he did not make a statement. The Council
Hate
of
crime,
American Islamic
hate crime.
Relations has a Chicago chapter,
Hate
and they're
crime,
helping
hate
the family
crime.
through this extremely difficult time. Here's what the executive director of the Chicago chapter
Because they were
said.
Muslim. Hate crime, hate crime. Prejudiced maniac.
And he paid the price for the atmosphere of hate. He has no clue about these larger issues happening in the world, but he was made to pay for it.
The little boy was made to pay for all these
This was,
issues. He
and it was actually the Council
he
of
had no
American
idea what was
Relations
going on in
provided
the
more
world.
detail to help illustrate why police are charging this man with hate crimes. They said that the mother had texted the father from the hospital describing that this man, Joseph Zuba, came into the house. He tried to choke her, proceeded to attack her with a knife, and yelled, "You Muslims must die." Copy, Phil.
Whitney, President
Hate crime,
Biden
hate
and First Lady
crime.
both weighed in last night on what
Against
happened.
Muslims.
Stop
it.
I mean, they have children. Any parent knows how horrific and sad and just devastating this would be. Here's what President Biden said. The child's Palestinian Muslim family came to America seeking what we all seek, a refuge to live, learn, and pray in peace. This horrific act of hate has no place in America and stands against our
Right.
fundamental values,
Right.
freedom from fear for how we pray, what we believe, and who we are. And, I think it's worth noting here, the Council on American Islamic Relations says that there had never been an incident. They lived there for 2 years, no problems, a switch flipped, and they believe it was directly related to the conflict in the Middle East. Back to you.
Whitney, thank you for that reporting.
In particular, against Jews and Muslim groups.
We have seen an increase in reported threats to these groups here in the United States, and we're moving quickly to mitigate them. So we're working closely with our partners in state and local law enforcement through our JTTFs, our Joint Terrorism Task Forces, to ensure that together we stay laser focused on mitigating threats we have identified and continue sharing intelligence to keep our communities safe.
Joining us now, CNN senior law enforcement analyst and former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, and Mikhail Kotler-Wunsch, Israel's special envoy for combating anti-Semitism. Guys, thanks for joining us. Andy, I want to start with you. What the FBI director says regarding moving quickly to mitigate what they're seeing right now, given the increase, what does that mean?
Well, Phil, it can mean a whole bunch of different things depending on the sort of threat that the FBI is focused on. So if they have credible information about a specific threat, that will prompt an investigation by the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force in the community where that threat exists. The Joint Terrorism Task Forces, there's about 200 of them around the country. They are made up of FBI agents and local partners for exactly this purpose. But on the other end of the spectrum, it may simply mean reaching out to state and local officials or community officials, people in the faith-based community, to explain what these threats are, to help people understand what the threats are and to protect themselves during times of elevated risk.
You know, Michal, you just returned from Israel. Your children, I believe, are serving. Is that right?
I live there. I actually just came to be able to engage here.
Thank you for what you do and for what they are doing right now as well. Can you speak to, it's one thing to combat this hate after you see it. It's another thing to work to change it from the inside out. Can you talk about that work in a moment like this?
Well, I'll say the hate that we just saw is awful in the case of the story that we just, about this little 6-year-old boy. I'll say that with the genocidal terrorists that bludgeoned and murdered and raped and burned, that tore babies out of their mother's arms just last Saturday morning as we were celebrating the Sabbath and a festival of joy in Israel that turned into living hell for thousands. We know that there are 199 abducted, but we also know that thousands were murdered and thousands are lying in the hospitals. That kind of genocidal hate, I'd say, fueled by a deep hatred, not only for the state of Israel, but for Jews. And the Hamas charter, just like Mein Kampf, actually stipulates clearly that its goal is to annihilate the state of Israel and to murder Jews. That kind of hate, I think, is not one we can understand.
Here, in the United States, also, how do you combat it so effectively, do you believe?
I think that one of our biggest challenges is to identify, it's part of the reason that I'm here, that it's the same anti-Semitic hate that actually enabled or fueled denial, justification, excusing for those heinous crimes, for the murder of entire families, for piling up 20 young boys one on the other and igniting them in front of their parents. If there is somebody that cannot condemn that unequivocally, then there is not anything that we can do without identifying the anti-Semitism that fuels it. In order to be able to address or identify anything, we have to first define it. And anti-Semitism is defined not only as what we see here on the ground in protests and what we hear as we are Hamas, or in university campuses where we hear legitimization of what it was that happened last Saturday, but actually, in many ways, the understanding that anti-Zionism is our modern form of anti-Semitism. It's imperative that we understand that if we're going to be able to identify and combat it.
Andrew, from a law enforcement perspective, I mean, what Michal is laying out right now, how complicated is this moment, given kind of the various threads, platforms, all of the different dynamics fueling this?
It's incredibly complicated, Phil. It's, it's primary in the role of every counterterrorism official in this country is watching events overseas, understanding that terrorist attacks overseas can often inspire or drive reactionary attacks here in the homeland. So that's what they're looking for. I can guarantee that the FBI is reaching out to their partners in the Jewish community and the Muslim community with concern over crimes like we saw in Chicago over the weekend. In addition, they're talking to informants, to sources of information. They're helping state and local officials protect locations that might be at greater risk. There's no question in my mind that the folks in the counterterrorism division at the FBI are working 24/7 right now with their eyes on this potential threat.
All right, Andrew McCabe and Mikhail Kundalunch, thank you very much. And seeing them this morning continues right now.
Along Israel's border with Gaza, more than 300,000 soldiers, tanks, heavy equipment, artillery await orders.
One of the big issues for the IDF to distinguish between Hamas and civilians.
We may have experienced war before, but what's happening right now is unprecedented.
Israel has the right to defend itself, but he said that they should not occupy Gaza.
I think it'd be a big mistake.
The way that Israel does this matters.
We are going to destroy Hamas. They opened this war